Hi, everybody. My name is Anastasia Allen. I'm the Executive Director at Navigate STL Schools. And today we are sitting down with Tiara Jordan with Activate STL. Tiara, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I am well. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, we'd like to start off with this question for everybody. Like, what's your personal K 12 education story?
Yes. The why. So for me personally, I grew up in Flint, Michigan. Very similar kind of situations to what you see here in St. Louis or most inner cities with a lack of resources and support. And so early on, when I was about 3, I remember my dad saying we had to move. And I didn't understand why. When you're a young kid, you love your neighborhoods, the corner store, the old lady down the street that gives y'all food and stuff like that. But I just remember him really saying, like, we have to leave for school. And I didn't understand. But essentially, my parents had saved up money to move us to the, at that time, all white, affluent, like counter city that had like the second best school district in the state. Right. But at 3, I didn't know that. So we moved there. They didn't want us there. From the neighborhood, there was a lot of like, why are you here? Go back to your side of town, to the school. But my parents were like, no, this is the right decision. Our kids deserve these resources, right? So I grew up there, went to that school district K-12, got a great education, top of the line resources. But I think as I got older, I started to kind of see the differences between what me and my brother, the type of education my brother and I were receiving versus like my cousins and friends from the neighborhood, right? And so I always knew I wanted to be a teacher and went into school. My undergrad was in special education, but started to learn about inequities in education. We took this class where we read Jonathan Kozel's Savage Inequalities, just
Mm.
around, yeah,
There's
like
actually a chapter in that book on East St. Louis, which is
yes, it
crazy.
is. Yeah. And then just hearing about like even like the condition of the schools, like I'm like, how are you supposed to learn if the ceiling's falling in or, you don't have textbooks? Like that blew my mind in comparison to the education that I received. And so at that point, I believe it was my junior year. When I took that course, I said I always knew I wanted to be an educator. After learning this information, I will only educate certain populations in specific cities, right? And so that's what I did. So right after college, I went and became a teacher in Chicago. So I spent from 2008 pretty much until I moved here between Chicago, Cleveland, and New York being a teacher and a principal. And so what brought me kind of full circle here to St. Louis doing this work with Activate STL is I have my daughter. I have a baby girl who's 2. And so that parent like kind of clicked for me, and I started to view this whole education game a little differently. And I'm like, we as parents have to speak up. We have to be knowledgeable around what's going on because people are making decisions for our babies that are not in their best interest unless we kind of activate, stand up, and demand better. So that's kind of full circle how we got to this point. And I think when I tell my story, I tell people like I was blessed and fortunate. Everybody's parents don't know or have the finances to be able to
Mm-hmm.
pick up and move to an affluent neighborhood. And so the other option is you demand quality schools in your neighborhood, and that's Activate.
It's crazy. I always tell people this whole argument around school choice is not new. People have always made choices about where they chose to educate their children based on where they chose to buy houses or to settle down at. And not everybody, like you said, has those resources to be able to just up and move to a better district. And that doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be able to have good options or to choose what is going to be the best way to educate their children. What is Activate STL? So we kind of talked around it and how you got to the organization per se, but like, what actually is it?
And that's such a great question. I think for me going into this work, I didn't really want to define what it was without knowing the community. Being not
Mm-hmm.
from St. Louis, I think just nationally, there's this trend of people jumping into spaces where there's a need and kind of acting as if they have the answer
Mm-hmm.
and the solution to fix a community that they don't know anything about. And so with Activate, I think the beauty in this opportunity is that I was given the time to really meet with other people in the community who are doing similar work, to meet with the community and say like, hey, what do y'all actually know about what's going on in education here? And like what are you upset about? And like what is the plan of attack? And so the biggest thing about Activate is that we don't really have a plan. We're letting the parents drive the plan. So through our work of kind of mobilizing and organizing parents, we're developing their leadership skills. We're providing them with information at all levels of what they should be knowing and who's responsible for the state of education in St. Louis. And kind of through that process, we're determining maybe what our campaigns are or our focus areas are. And so we want to build the org with parents. We say a lot of time it's by parents for parents, right? And it's not like Tiara's org. Like, I'm just here to provide the space, the resources, and the opportunities for parents to be able to have their voice heard and kind of, come together and execute some of their ideas.
You mentioned that a part of the work is helping parents understand who is actually running education per se in the city of St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that this organization is so important for families, particularly families in the city?
Yeah, so St. Louis got a lot of politics going on. And I think for me, being in K-12 for the past 15 years and in the school, I would have told you prior to getting in this role that, like, if you want something changed in education, you go to the principal or the superintendent or the executive director. My mind has totally flipped on that. Like, they can make decisions within that school building, especially if they're charter, they have a little bit more autonomy. But, like, who's, like, holding or pulling the strings around how many schools we have, if they're quality, holding those schools accountable if they stay open, if they don't, things like that. Those type of things are happening at the levels from mayor to aldermen to senators to council members. And so parents don't typically get that far. Like, the farthest they typically will go is the board if they feel like they're not getting a response from the school building. But I think it's important for them to understand how some of these policies, legislation, and decisions are made around accountability, and that's at levels far beyond the school. And so that's what we're kind of teaching parents about and educating them on.
So you mentioned charter schools. Why is it that this narrative exists that you only support charter schools?
Yes. And I think, to be fully transparent, my journey, I've only worked in charter school. So I did go to public school, right? But as I told in my story earlier, my parents had to find the white affluent, similar to a Clayton or Ladue is essentially what my parents did, if you want to compare Flint to St. Louis. So charter schools. Why I am an advocate of charter schools is because I believe that children do not have time to wait for adults to get it together. And there are places where the public school district is doing fine. I have nothing wrong with them. If you're doing right by kids and they're learning and you're providing a quality education, like, that's the goal. But if you are in a city such as St. Louis, the reality of our city, where the public school district is not doing well, and to be honest, it's failing kids, like, we don't have time to wait for them to get it together. Kids are growing, and every year matters. And so for me, what charter schools provide is an option, a solution in the meantime. And, like, whether it's the autonomy they have for resources or different ways that they can teach, there's a lot of things you have to follow in the district. You get to be a little bit more creative in charters. And so I just support people having solutions that are going to get us to quality quicker. And then I also really support people seeing that, like, one size does not fit all when it comes to education. And I think charters are a big proponent of kind of, like, trying new things, different teaching models, using different curriculum, hands-on, hybrid field trips. Like, kids are different, and especially now, different things are going to interest them, different things are going to excite them, and I feel like charters provide that. Now, we do get a lot of rap of, like, it's only charters. That's not it. I would say what we are is we want all kids to have a quality education. What we've noticed specifically in St. Louis is the charter population is growing, right? So a lot of people are choosing, and parents are choosing, to remove their kids from the district to a charter, trying to find an alternative for their kid. And so we want to protect that choice. That, like, parents should always have a choice in schools and should not be forced to say, like, these are your options in your neighborhood, like, pick from the 4 failing schools. And so that's what we're doing at Activate, just supporting parents in making that choices and saying, like, what else can you do to ensure that, like, this is not the story for years and years to come, that every school in your neighborhood is failing.
All right. So you mentioned failing schools, and unfortunately, that's a reality in St. Louis and a lot of urban communities because of how schools are funded with the tax base. And if people don't own their homes, if people are choosing not to live in certain areas because they don't see that there are quality education options, then unfortunately, you do see a lack of funding in certain buildings, in certain neighborhoods, in certain communities, predominantly Black and Brown communities and under resourced communities. And that's a really hard reality to face when you see that you do have so many great teachers that care. You do have lots of social emotional components that come from being in a school in your neighborhood. And so it's really unfortunate that some kids do have to miss out on that. I guess my question to follow up from that is, as you think about parents moving their children into private education or into charter education, or as you see the ways that neighborhoods are shifting and changing, or even like the culture and climate of what's happening politically outside of education is actually impacting kids, what do you think is one of the greatest challenges that's facing education, particularly that in St. Louis City?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at the end of the day, the adults are in the way. And that was something that I witnessed often, even in the school building. But a lot of times, our babies are hurting and are not getting the best of what they need because of adult stuff, adult politics, adult agendas, adult preferences, right? And like people tell this story based on where they land on the spectrum, based on their family, but they're not always thinking about other families.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, there's magnet schools at SLPS, and if you just do the work and your kid gets in the magnet school, they can get a great education like my kid. But I went to the board meeting last week. The majority of the kids in the SLPS magnet schools are white, but the district is made up of over 70% Black kids. So like, what are we really talking about? It's like I get it, but like let's have real conversations, not just about your situation and privilege that you may have inherited by your role or your status with who you're connected with, and let's talk about all children and make decisions for all children and not like select groups. And so I think it's the adults. I also think the other thing really hurting St. Louis, because I've worked in some other communities that are under resourced, underserved. You think about Chicago. I worked on the south and west sides of that city. Cleveland is another one. And even in New York, being in Brooklyn, like the one thing that I've noticed in these spaces that have found success, contrary to what's happening in Kansas City and St. Louis, is everybody came together. So when the public district and the public charter schools decided to say the issue is bigger than our like petty whatever disagreements, like we're really about kids, that city has seen growth. And we've yet to do that here. Like we're still wanting to like fight each other and have separate meetings and not come together and like synergize and bring all of that power and energy together. Like when we decide to do that, I think there will be some hope. And even though I'm supporting charter parents who make up 40% of the city, I would love to work with SLPS, because iron sharpens iron. This is an issue for all kids. Doesn't matter if they go to charter or they go to district. Like this is about education. So I think if we could come together and stop that and really all come to the table with like honesty and optimism and a collaborative spirit, I think we can make gains in the city.
All right, so we talked about the challenges that are facing St. Louis City, and you talked about some of the things that have worked in other like major metropolitan areas. What do you think gives you hope for the future of St. Louis public school systems?
Yeah, so St. Louis has a lot of pride. Like I'm not from here. Like I said, I'm originally from Flint, and I feel like any city you're from Toledo. Like people have pride in their city, right? Like we love our city, like good, bad, or indifferent. What's gonna be in the news? You can talk about the water crisis in Flint, but like people from Flint are proud. And I think in the short amount of time that I've been here, people from St. Louis are proud. And I think when you have a community that's like proud to be from the Lou, proud of their high schools, everything is about high schools here. I went to Metro, I went to. And so like I think that pride, if we can tap into like, yes, love your city and want the best for your city, but like we do have to actually take some action and not just hope and wish that what's going on with education in the city is going to change. And I think we're getting there. So like we're starting with our little small groups of parents that we're working with, and like it has been such a joy week over week to see them get so invested. And last night they did their first kind of research meeting with former Senator Jamila Nasheed, and they were so excited after. Like they were like, Miss Jordan, I've never talked to an elected official before, you know, or a former elected official, or like ask them questions like that. Like I really feel powerful, and I'm like, that's the game. Like that's what we're trying to do. Like y'all have the power to change this. If we keep coming together and keep asking the questions of the people who can make the difference.
So, as we talk about parent involvement and asking questions and things like that, what do you think that parents should be considering when they're selecting a school for their child? Because as we know, a lot of the applications for St. Louis magnet schools, as well as the public charter schools and a lot of the private schools, they opened on October 1st of 2022 for the 22-20 or for the 23-24 school year. And so when you think about that, a lot of parents are not thinking about, oh, well, where am I going to send my kid to school next year? In October, it's like, oh, we just got the kid in school. Let's get used to the schedule. And so, like, that's a disadvantage for a lot of families. So what do you consider like to be what the top 3, 5, whatever things that parents should be considering when they're selecting a school for their child?
Yeah, I think that is so it's twofold, right? Because I can answer this as an educator, then I can also answer this as a parent. I'll answer it as a parent first. So I think your org, right? So I will always tell a parent, like, there's going to be lists and ratings that say, like, this school is great. My question is going to be, like, for who? Like, who is the population? What are they offering? And so my counter to that is, like, who is your kid as a student? You know, like how do they learn best? Like, are they more of a traditional student? Do they like more hands-on project-based learning? Are they more like exploratory, where they want a school where they're out in the community and those real life experiences are really what attracts them? So I would always ask a parent, like, what do you know about your kid as a scholar and what they enjoy? And then I would send them to like your website, right? Like the way your website is set up, like you can set up all these filters. My kid likes this, they like this type of curriculum or these things, and then like narrow down your list, because I think it's half knowing your kid, half knowing what's available to you, and then finding the perfect match in between would be my answer as a parent. As a former principal and teacher, as an educator, I would say you need to be looking at the curriculum choice and why they chose that curriculum. Like, is it up to date? Like, is it inclusive? Do black and brown kids see themselves in that curriculum? Like, what is it actually teaching them? And what is the message that kids are getting out of that? I think you want to look at schools, like, what do they offer as far as extracurriculars? Like, people try to like push that to the side and they think it's all about like read, write, math. Those are essential, but like those electives are where students really develop who they are as a person. So like their creativity, like their like really like their interest, their motivation, like those type of things. So like, do they have a robust extracurricular program? And like, what is my child being exposed to? That could be like trips or traveling overseas, or, you know, internships within the community and partnerships of that school. And then you want to look at some of the stuff like, how are kids doing? You could send your kid to a school and then people could be real nice, right? The principal's real nice and the teachers are real nice. Is my child learning? How are they growing on state assessments? What is the achievement rate in comparison to national norms? Like, those are the things that parents need to know, because some schools are doing well and some aren't. But like, you have to evaluate your kid, what you're able to supplement and provide at home versus what they need to get at school, and you need to make those like real life choices. So those would be my two answers as a parent and then as an educator.
Okay. So having those two hats, like the parent hat versus the educator hat, one thing that you would say that parents just need to understand about the system, they just have to understand it, because one of the things that we get asked a lot is, why is it like this? How did this happen? Like, why don't we just go to something easier? Like, why does it take so long? Why is this happening now? And the long and the short of it is racism. But it's really complicated when you get to the way that everything is kind of laid on top of each other. And so we really do navigate, really emphasize that personal responsibility. Yes, the system as a whole is broken, but as an individual, we can help you chart a path through it that's going to lead to your child's success. But I feel like at Activate, you're really trying to get parents to figure out how to change the system as a whole. So what's that one thing that you just think that as they get into this work, as they get into putting their children into the system, and as they get into this overall, we can change how people are educated altogether? Just like, what's that one thing that everybody has to know?
The system is doing exactly what the system was designed to do. And when you understand what the system was designed to do, i.e., not help you if you are the same color as me, then you have to understand that, like, if the system was designed to have our babies going to failing schools, but at the same time have you in constant survival mode so that you can't breathe enough to understand what's going on or to have the capacity to actually help your child, that's what it was designed to do. Because they want, they want the rich to stay rich, the power to stay where it is, our kids to not get what they need, all of that is designed. So when I tell parents when they walk away, is like, the only other option is to go up against the system or to start to break the system or redesign the system. And that takes your voice, your power, you showing up saying, like, I see what y'all are doing. It's not helping me. Like, we're the voters, like, we're electing you in office, and like what y'all doing right now is not working, but it needs to come. It can start small, but it needs to come in numbers. Otherwise, the system's going to continue to do what it was designed to do very well. And it's not in the best interest of Black and brown people. And that's what I constantly tell my parents. Like, you're frustrated. That's sad. That's on purpose. That's not magic. That's intentional.
So how do parents get involved with Activate?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. So as a mom myself, actually everyone that works with us is moms, and then we have quite a few moms and dads that are a part of Activate. We realize that everyone can participate at different levels. So typically when we're talking with parents, we're saying, like, hey, what's your capacity right now? Like, we can build you up to being at the most involved level. But for right now, it's as simple as you can come to, we have an advocacy series that we do with the Missouri Charter School Association once a month on Saturdays, right? So that's a little bit of a lower lift. Like, do you have one Saturday a month for 2 hours where you can come learn with us? We had one this past Saturday around voting and the importance of voting. We also have a parent activator council that meets every Tuesday. So if you're a little bit more involved and you can dedicate like a night a week, you can come with us every Tuesday, right? And then we have our larger community events. So on Saturday, we're taking some families out to like a fall harvest, bonding and building relationships. So we always give a menu. Because I don't want to, I feel like if you go to people and you're like, get involved, here's what you have to do. It's like, well, I can't really, but if you say like, here's different steps of how you can kind of get your feet, where people are like, okay, I can do that. I can send this letter to this elected official from my house, right? So we give different ways for them to get involved. And then from there, one of the parent organizers on my team will start to conduct one-on-ones with you, right? So we're building the relationship. We're also building your leadership capacity. And like through those conversations, those organizers are determining like what level for involvement you're ready for, or like what's your next step to continuously keep you engaged and growing throughout your time with us. So you can hit us up on Facebook. Our website's almost done. But you can hit us up on Facebook to get info there. We're at the Del Mar Divine as well, so you can come and visit us here. But that's the easiest way right now, Facebook and Instagram, to just get in touch with us, and then we'll reach out and we'll do everything from there.
All right. I have one last question before we wrap up. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about challenges. We talked about our hopes for the future. What's just something that's unexpected that you've encountered in the work that you do? And why is that significant for you?
Unexpected. I think being new, so just hitting the ground running in like February. We talk about this a lot in the Black community, but this idea of like scarcity, like there's not enough for everybody. So like only one person can be working on a specific issue. And I think what's been unexpected for me is like my counter to that is like, if you have that mindset, you don't truly understand how big the issue is. Because even though there are quite a few nonprofits in this area now, when you look at the data and where the education trends are in the city, we could probably have 10 to 15 more nonprofits. I think the missing part that I saw initially is people weren't working together. So they were working harder, not smarter. There were 4 organizations doing the exact same thing, trying to engage the exact same group of parents. And I was like, why don't we all come together and do it together and bring those parents together? There's power in numbers. There's power in bringing like all these really great executive directors together to do the same work through different lanes. And people have been very open to it. So like the Missouri Charter School Association had a meeting last month where they brought all the nonprofit leaders who are doing advocacy work or reaching out with families and communities. And now we're actually starting to band together and work smarter and not harder. And so that for me has been really nice, because originally I was like, is this going to happen? But I'm happy that it did, because I think we can go further together.
All right. And so to wrap up, what do you want the public to take away from the work that you do? And then just again, where can people find you?
Yeah. So I want people to take away that like we cannot just rely on schools to fix this issue. We have to know our reality of education right now. If you don't, I would Google what are education trends in St. Louis. You can start there. You can reach out to us. But I think the first thing we can do as a community is have truthful, real, and hard conversations about what's going on with education here. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not act like it's not a big issue because your kid is doing okay. Like, let's really have honest conversations. And you can find us on Facebook or Instagram. Just type in Activate STL. And then we're also here at the Del Mar Divine on the 3rd floor. And if you go up to our office space, there's a flyer and info with emails of how you can contact us as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. And it was a great conversation.
Thank you.